Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Odoo Live Services webinar. My name is Hari,
And I'm Catalina.
and we are the product owners for North American localizations at Odoo with over 6 years of experience here. And we've been working very closely with the Payroll app in the past couple of months and years. Let me go over how this is going to work, and then we'll take a look at some of your questions. We'll take a look at some workflows, some basic setup that you would need to be aware of to kickstart using Payroll in Odoo. It's going to be a live Q&A session here, so we'll be taking a look at the questions that you post in the chat. It will be a live demo, so we'll try to answer your questions with an Odoo database as much as possible. We'll try to show you how to set these up depending on what the questions are. You'll get a look into some tips and tricks that you typically won't find in the documentations, and you'll also get a look at a sneak peek into how business systems analysts or BSAs at Odoo answer questions or even approach these questions when they're asked by clients. So, Kata, I mentioned US localization a couple of times. Can you expand on exactly what that means, especially from a payroll context?
Yeah. Before we start, I want to highlight that, as Hari was mentioning, we're going to talk about US payroll localization. What does it mean? It means that if you have a business in the US and you're interested in using payroll, we're going to highlight the specifics or the specific fields, information, and details that you need to know and configure in your database to have a functioning business and a payroll workflow in the US. Fields like, or things like where I can find my W-4 information, reports like W-2, 940, 941, or even like how to pay in the payroll workflow. For the US, we will be covering all of that. So, Hari, I know that you just finished an implementation with a big client.
Yeah.
So I want to know, where did you start? Because I know that the first question that people ask is, how can I configure my employees in Odoo?
Yeah, absolutely. Usually, when someone thinks about starting off using payroll in Odoo, the first place to start, and this is not just limited to Odoo. You could say this for any payroll software. You usually start with the employees because most of payroll, I would say 90% of what you find in your pay slips is driven by what you have from the employees application. So for those of you who have not used Odoo in the past or are seeing my screen for the first time and don't know what this is essentially the landing page of Odoo. What you will get once you've installed your applications, this is basically your landing page from where you can access your different apps. The application in question we'll most likely be spending our time on is payroll, but we'll start off with the employees app. As Kata was just mentioning, most of our payroll comes from setting up employees. And you can see we have a couple of employees set up here. Kata, can you tell me, when you're setting up an employee, what do you think would be some crucial or important fields or information you would need for a payroll software?
Perfect. So I think I always get the same two questions at the beginning.
Yeah.
First is, how can I differentiate a salaried employee with an hourly employee?
Mm-hmm.
How can I make that distinction, and what are the differences that I can see in Odoo? And also, the questions that I get is where I can fill my W-4 fields information.
Absolutely.
Marital status, estate status. Can you show me that?
Yeah, absolutely. What you're looking at here is an employee record for Randall Lewis. I'll go over, of course, I won't go over every single field we have on the employee record because some of them are not related to payroll, but they could be useful for your other HR suite of applications. We'll go over some important fields here that are relevant for actually setting up payroll or what payroll pulls from our employees module. First and foremost, what you're looking at here is just the work information for Randall Lewis for the specific company, which is just a maintenance company we have here in this database. Work address, I would say, is the single most important work-related information that is going to drive how your payslip looks, what your payslip salary rules are like, because your states are going to play a very important part.
Oh, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course.
Does that mean that I can have employees in different states and I will see differences in their payroll calculation?
Depending on what you have set in the states, the salary rules are going to be dependent on which work address that is set for these employees. So absolutely, the answer to that question is yes. You can have employees in different states as long as you are specifying the actual work address, the state field being the most important one, you will see different salary lines for state income taxes for each of these employees.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Hari.
You'll see here that Randall is set to Alabama. So what we expect when we eventually go and create a payslip, which I will be showing you as we go through this workflow, is state taxes for Alabama showing up for Randall. I see some questions coming in, but just to quickly show you some of these fields that that will be important. Work address here, where you set up where they actually work. And we have a whole tab that's called payroll, and this is where most of the information lives. So going back to what you mentioned earlier, Kata, where do we put the W-4 information? That's right here under a subheading called W-4, where you have fields that can hold information that you would typically put into your W-4 form. Going to try to answer another question that Kata had asked. The main difference between hourly employees and salaried employees. That will be right under the contract overview here. There's a wage type here, which is fixed wage or hourly wage. And we also have a contract type, which covers things like hourly contract types, salaried exempt, salaried non-exempt. And then we have at the bottom of this payroll tab, we have things that are additional to your salary rules, things like your 401k, your medical, dental, or any other benefits that you want under health benefits. And we also have other benefits like commuters and Roth 401k if you're not going the traditional style. So most of what you would see in your payslip comes from this one tab you see here in payroll.
Perfect. I do have one question.
Yeah.
Because what we're talking before, what we've discussed is the difference in where to configure this hourly versus salaried. But for attendances, I think I saw in there a question about working schedule. Does it change a little bit if I have people that are hourly or need to check in and check out for the day?
Yeah, absolutely, it does. It really depends on from employee to employee. You could have employees that strictly follow a working schedule, which means they could have a shift. They come in at 8 a.m., clock out at 5 p.m., and you just want to follow that working schedule for the week. You would just set the work entry source to working schedule at that point. If you do set this to attendances, this is you telling Odoo that my work entries for this specific employee is based on when they clock in and clock out. So specifically coming from the attendances application. So if an employee clocks in at a specific time and clocks out at a specific time, Odoo tracks how many hours they've worked, and if they've been set to an hourly wage type, it would actually calculate your wages based on the hours worked. But that's a great question.
That's perfect. Yeah, I think that is the most common question that I receive whenever we talk payroll with clients. I see a question on the chat, and I can answer that one. They're asking about prevailing wage. So prevailing wage is something that we have considered, and we are working or have it on the works for the US. We know that it's a very important topic for California. So it's a work in progress feature, but we are addressing it, and as soon as we have news, we will show you how to do that.
Yeah.
Also, there's a question that says how to handle shareholder information and health insurance premiums for proper 941 and W-2 generation. I think that's a very, very specific question.
Yeah.
Maybe it will be out of the scope of this webinar.
Yeah. That's a good question. Thank you for asking. I think the question comes from Clear Square. We do have, Odoo does support generation of the 940, 941. It's under the payroll application. You would find the W2 940, 941 generated in the form of a CSV file, which you can then upload into a form generating software or another payroll software to actually get your W2 form generated. Although this question seems to be a little specific to how you would handle premiums for shareholders. To avoid going into very specific settings that may not be relevant for the others in the chat, we definitely recommend you can go through a success pack to actually get a business analyst to answer more tailored questions to your business software.
Yeah. Can I add something?
You can jump in, yeah, of course.
So even though, as I mentioned at the beginning, this webinar, we will talk about US payroll, how Odoo works or how Odoo is configured, it is based on very specific and general use cases for companies.
Absolutely.
We know that payroll can be as tailored as your company needs can be, so it can be very specific. We know that. But what I want to reassure you or assure you that is that Odoo has the ability for you to configure on top of what we worked or what we built for the US. So, for example, if you click on configurations, Harry, please, you
I'm
will
in Payroll?
in the Payroll app, exactly, you will see that rules modules in there. So this is the base calculation for the US core payroll module or localization. So if you need very specific rules, like in there it says for S Corp shareholders or very specific calculations on top of what Odoo has, you have the option to build them in here. We are not going to explain this in this type of webinar. It is very specific. It can go as detailed as your company needs.
Yep.
But don't forget that this is a basic product that can help needs for most of our customers or for most of companies. But if you need a specific, you can build it from Odoo.
Yeah.
Let me go. There's a couple of other questions.
I see a question coming from Shelly Ratz. Please excuse me if I pronounced that wrongly. When will you localize for all 50 states? And I think this is a very common question that we get. Let me just transition back to our slides. We'll spend some time just going over what states we do support. To answer your question itself, when will we localize for all 50 states? It is part of our pipeline, but I can't give you a fixed timeline on it because it really depends on state-to-state rules, how the salary rules change within states. There are some states that are more complex than the others. So as we work on adding more state support for our US payroll, we will keep you updated. For now, we have 21 states supported. The way we approach these states is mainly based on impact and also based on feedback that we get from a lot of clients that use Odoo and want to try to add payroll to their existing suite of apps. As of version 19, you will have 16 states supported. As of version 19.3, we do have an additional 5 states, the latest ones being Georgia, Iowa, Mississippi, New Jersey, and Tennessee, with 4 more states that I'm currently working on, so that is coming on the way. Just to name a few of them, it's Michigan, Kentucky, Missouri, and possibly Ohio as well, but depending on how complex that is, we will be deciding the timeline on that. But the goal, to answer your question, is 100% to get all 50 states in there supported within Odoo. The timeline itself is really dependent on how complex each of these states can be.
So just to clarify and to summarize, you mentioned that you are already working to adding more states, and those will be available soon.
Yeah.
Enough? Perfect.
We plan to target version 20 for these new states. So, keep a watch on our US payroll documentation. We make sure we update them as we add new states. So if you ever have a question on, hey, I want to implement this state in Odoo for US payroll, do they support it? And you will find that updated in our documentation as soon as we introduce new states.
Perfect. I see that there is a question about the specific state of Pennsylvania. And I know that was close to be worked.
Good question. And I know a lot of you will ask questions on, hey, is this specific state implemented already or is it supported already? Pennsylvania is definitely one of the next few states that's coming, not as part of the next iteration, but possibly the one after that. Again, it really comes down largely to the demand we get on the states and also the impact it will have in some of these states. Which is why if you see this map right here, states like New York, California have already been covered. They were one of the first few iterations of state to be covered. But Pennsylvania should be coming sometime soon. Again, I can't promise a timeline here because it fully depends on resources. It depends on the complexity of each of these states. But stay tuned and keep a watch on our documentation.
Yeah, that's good. And I think I see a couple of questions about the roadmap, features that we're missing or features that that you need for your companies. We will review that a little bit at the end, but I do feel that it's important for you to feel or to see how Odoo Payroll works.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
What if you, Harry, show us a little bit more of how can this information that we saw on the employee configuration will be moved or will be shown or seen in the Payroll app, please?
Yeah, absolutely. You'll see a couple of employees set up here, and what we want to go over as part of this webinar is, as Kata mentioned, to show you how this flows from the employees app to the payroll app, so you at least get an idea of how this works. I'm going to use the same example here of Randall Lewis. We already have most of the configurations or settings on the employee level setup. So you'll see Alabama here. Just to go over some of these important fields again, so you know what it looks like on the payslip itself. We have Randall set to a fixed wage salaried employee, which is exempt, 10,000 a month as a wage. We do have something set up here under benefits as well. You'll see I've already configured the medical, dental, vision, FSA dependent care, and FSA here under health benefits. 401k has been set up as well, along with a matching amount of 50%. So Randall looks like an employee that is that's set up pretty well. How
I
does
have
this
a
flow over?
question.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
good. This looks very good, but I do know that in some cases there's extra benefits that company needs. I know that these are the very basic
Yeah.
companies. Can I configure or can my clients configure other benefits on top of this?
Yeah, they absolutely can. What you see here are the most commonly used health benefits retirement plans that you would see across multiple companies. But if you do have additional, let's say, garnishments or anything that's very particular to how your company works, that can be set up as either salary adjustments, or you can set them up as a new salary rule itself, because salary rules are what's going to come over into the payslip itself as payslip lines.
Perfect.
I see a couple of questions on how the payslip itself looks. So just to open up a payslip that we've already created for Randall Lewis for the month of May, and I can show you, one that we create for the month of June. This is essentially what a payslip would look like, and it's already been computed. So if I scroll down a little bit here, I will see AL state income tax. And this is not something I manually have to put in. It came in because the work address for Randall has been set to Alabama. Just to show a couple of the others in here before we actually go through the process of creating a payslip or a pay run, you'll see employer taxes as well as employee taxes be a part of the payslip. And that is important because many states have specific employer taxes that you need to pay. A good example is FUTA, Medicare, Social Security. All of these will show up here. Although on the actual PDF, which is employee facing, you would only have the employee payslips in there.
Is it okay if we review this pay run for our small company that we have in here?
Yeah, of course. I'm going to jump out of the employees application here and jump into payroll because assuming we have everything set up for the employees, the payroll application is where you would primarily be creating your payslips and taking a look at how payroll itself works. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you,
Yeah,
Harry.
no
I
problem.
think there's a question and it is good to address it before we start jumping into a demo.
Yeah.
If the question is, if there are different companies configuring Odoo that have different pay and benefit structures, is there a way to set default templates for those?
That's a great question. Yes. Let's actually jump into pay structure since you've asked the question and go back to employees. We understand that, especially with US companies, pay structures is very important because you can have different employees working different structures. You'll see here that says pay category, and we have this set to United States employee. If you go into the payroll application and configuration, you will have structures and structure types too. You can absolutely create new structures. So we have created two structures, one for United States employee and one for United States hourly pay. Kata, if I can expand on this question here, do you think as a best practice, it's always better to create different structures for different employee types, or can employees all follow the same structure?
In my experience and with implementations that I've reviewed, I think it depends on the specific companies.
Yes.
If you have a pay schedule, for example, that differs from dates depending if you have hourly employees and salaried employees. For example, you pay your hourly employees on a weekly basis versus you pay your salaried employees twice a month or once a month. You will be, or I would recommend having two different structures.
Yes.
Or adding the question that similar to what the question says. I would use these default templates and start duplicating and building in top of that. Because
Correct.
I've seen also in companies that maybe benefits are slightly different from salaried employees and hourly employees.
Yep.
Maybe bonuses are in different time of the year too. So you are freely to configure everything in Odoo. But I would recommend, depending on your company's needs, review what is built as basic structures and start building on top of that.
Yeah, thank you. Just to add a small point in here, we let's come back to Randall Lewis here. once you have set up your salary structures and salary structure types, you can then start, setting these employees to the types that you have created. As Kata mentioned, it is very dependent on how you want your payroll to be set up or how your company operates. But as a best practice, if you have if you have hourly employees, salaried employees, or employees that follow really different payroll structures, we do recommend creating different structures for those.
Just to add to that, for example, another example that I've seen that is easily configured from here is that we have hourly employees that follow a working schedule. So they are not necessarily follow a shift,
Yes.
or they're not really having overtime on a weekly basis or in a mobile way. If that's the case, you can also use the contract type field in there at the middle of your...
This one right here?
Exactly, in there. So you can highlight which employees are exempt, non-exempt from overtime, or are basically hourly employees. How that works, if we go back to the employees view, so one step behind, exactly. In here, we have different views at the top right. So we have list view, hierarchy view. And if you want to review how your employees are configured in a better way, you can always use the list view and group by the different structures, group by the different configurations that you see inside of that payroll tab that we saw. I also seen that because that's very important if you want to follow a correct way of configuration that will minimize errors at the end when you start having your payroll runs inside Odoo.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, perfect. And I also see another question that is, how will this affect accounting? And we will talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the most important questions.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for the question, Denise. Accounting is definitely linked with payroll in a way where anything or most of the things that you create from these payslips should have journal entry implications. It should be creating journal entries or basically hitting your accounts. We will take a look at that in just a bit when we create a payslip to show you how journal entries are impacted from the actual payslips itself.
Yes.
A follow-up to the question we just answered from Maza. Thank you. Also, is it possible to pay out performance-based bonuses in the payroll application? Absolutely, yes. So these performance-based bonuses, again, if it is something that's recurring, if that's something that happens maybe once every year during their performance, during a performance cycle that you have, you can set these up as... you can either set these up as salary rules, or you can just do salary adjustments
Can you show
here.
Jessica? So
Yeah.
maybe we can show her.
There we go. We have actually set up already something that answers your specific question itself. So we can set up a performance bonus here. You do see a field here that's called duration, which can be very important in defining how you want these performance bonuses to show up on the payslip. It can be one time, if it's just for this year, and then you do it case by case every year. You could have it set to limited, unlimited, really depending on if you have a time frame. Of course, unlimited means no time frame, but limited means you can say, hey, this is the performance bonus, and I want it to end on a specific date. But these will show up directly. Actually, just to show you an example of Jessica's payslip that we created for the month of May. If you look at salary computations...
Can I stop you there? Just 1 second. In here, we jump from the employee configuration side to the payroll app. So imagine, we didn't need to open the payroll app. We just open employees. Harry, click at the top, that smart button that says pay slips. And you can see we have one pay slip process for that specific employee called Jessica. And Jessica had a performance bonus for the month of May. And you can see it if we open the pay slip, Harry. We can see it in there.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out, Kata.
No problem.
I jumped directly from employees, but for those of you who are new to Odoo, you will see smart buttons linked to most records in here, which will take you from one application to the other without having to jump back into what we call the landing page. I just jumped directly into the pay slip here for Jessica. And if you look at the salary computation, the performance bonus shows up right here. And that's because I defined what that performance bonus is as a one-time payment.
Perfect.
Thank you for the questions, everyone.
I think maybe is half of the webinar already. I think it's good to show how we can process or create a payroll run. So we can show Denise how this payroll run will be showcased in the accounting camera.
Yeah. To get to some of the questions like how will this affect accounting, or what the payslip actually looks like, we do want to show you the process of creating a pay run or a payslip. And that's done directly through the payroll application itself. So I'll take a couple of minutes to go through the workflow, and then we'll get back to some of your questions. Thank you all for all the questions. What you see here is the main dashboard of payroll. Now, something neat here before I actually jump into the payslip, you'll actually see the top left, it says warnings. And this is something that usually, the moment you jump into an app, if it's greeting you with a warning, you would want to see what that's about and see how you can solve these issues. So it points out that I have employees without running contracts and employees without SSN. So what these warnings are just a nice way of Odoo telling you, hey, you have your employees set up, but if there's crucial pieces of information missing that is needed for payroll, it's going to point out what's missing. So at least this way, even if there is human error and you've missed adding, let's say, SSN, which is important for your payslips, it will show you exactly the employee that doesn't have that information. I can open up the employee, go down to their information, and then put whatever is missing. Right now, you'll see its SSN number. So if I just put in any SSN number in here and save it, that should take care of the warning. Oh, sorry. There we go.
Perfect. Are those warnings? Oh, that's great. I see that they disappeared. That's very straightforward. Are those warnings pre-configured for Odoo, or are they flexible so companies can actually edit them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or customize them?
Out of the box, you do get some warnings that's already been configured. The way to access them again is going into configuration, which is usually the last menu item of every application, and you'll find the configurations of that app within this setting. All the way at the bottom, we have warnings where we already have pre-configured warnings set here. But we understand payroll softwares are, have a lot of moving parts. They're different from different companies for different states, different localities. So if you have warnings that you don't find here or something that's very unique to your company, you can absolutely create new warnings in here and define what that warning is.
Yeah.
Of course, you're not just creating the name of the warning, but you also need to say what the warning, when it's supposed to pop up, or what exactly is the condition that we're looking for. But short answer to your question is yes. We do have one more warning here, which is employees without running contracts, and that's okay. We're not going to be focusing much on John David for now, so I'm not going to actually use the time to create a contract, but keep in mind that this will really help you set up your payroll. On the menu items, you'll see payslips and pay runs, and this is where you're going to be creating your payslips or pay runs, which is primarily going to be used if you have multiple employees and you're not going to be creating one payslip per employee every period. I'm going to actually create a pay run. So I'll go ahead into pay runs, click on new. And this is where I'm just circling back to a previous question on what if we have different structures, or can we have different structures? And this is where all the structures will show up. So if I select regular pay, I'm creating a pay run for employees that fall under regular pay. Let's do for the month of June, because we already showed you an example for May. I'll go ahead and hit continue, and you'll see 3 employees that actually fall into the structure that I've created. Point to note here is if I have an employee as part of a different structure, they don't show up here because the payslips can be significantly different from hourly employees to salaried employees. So structures really help you classify these employees into the different structures. Yeah,
and that circles back to my previous answer. Should we have different, or if Odoo had default structures? Yes, we have. But if you have one way or certain schedules for pay, as I was mentioning before, that is the importance of having specific structures that tailor or group your employees on the schedule that you're going to pay.
Yeah.
So in this case, we do need to check. We know that those specific employees work with a fixed work schedule, so we know that the pay kind of repeats every pay period. But for hourly employees, we need to have dive deeper into review every line, check that the hours work, and if there's any overtime or double time, depending on the state needs, they're actually reflected correctly.
Yeah. All right. I've selected all my employees because I want to process all of them in this pay run. Let's go ahead and hit select. And that creates payslips for multiple employees at the same time. So you're more than welcome to create payslips individually, but a pay run is the best way when you're actually going through a periodic payslip cycle. So monthly, weekly, bi-weekly, whatever the cycle is. This is where you'll see different stages in here, what we call stages: ready, done, and paid. And here's where we recommend you spend some time to go over your actual computations for each of these payslips. Because what Odoo is doing at this point when you create a pay run is pull your information from the employees, create your salary computations based on what their states are, what garnishments you've added, what salary computations you've added, and then it creates this salary computation section or this tab with the salary rules or the payslip lines as we call. If you scroll down here, you'll see, for example, Abigail Peterson has CA state income tax. Why? Because the address for Abigail was set to California, as opposed to if I move over to Randall here, we already took a look, has AL or Alabama state income tax. Just to show you the third and last employee here with Jessica, which has Oregon income tax. So you'll see it differs. And in fact, if I go back to payslips, they all have the same basic wage. And we've set it up this way purposely to show you that even though the basic wage is the same, you'll see the net wage differs. So the reason net wage differs is because differences in state taxes or anything else that you add, which I think Jessica is a very good example because there's an additional performance bonus that's been added, which doesn't show up for other employees. The work days will show you how many days they have worked. This is more relevant for hourly employees because you really want to keep a track of how many hours they worked. All these 3 employees are salaried. So for now, this looks good to me. They've worked for 22 days and the actual basic salary is based on number of days worked and the working schedule. Yes, Kata?
For example, for these, also these salaried employees that have a fixed work schedule, if you go back to the work days at the middle of your screen, if we had a holiday and that is pre-configured in the system, like with the upcoming 4th of July, for example, or if we have time off and that needs to be reflected from our employees, you will see it in here. So if everything is pre-configured correctly, and that's I would say the power behind the Payroll app is how it connects to a lot of different apps from the HR suite and from accounting that we will see in a second.
Absolutely.
So if you have information from attendances, it will appear here. From working schedules, from planning, from time off, expenses. If you want to pay an expense of an employee, in that specific pay period, we can add it. So there's a lot of use cases, as we mentioned before. We have this pre-configured database for specific or very straightforward use cases, but feel free to ask specific functional questions if you need them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a general theme of Odoo itself. Most apps speak to each other, and Payroll is no exception here. All the apps that Kata just mentioned, they're aligned with Payroll, so anything you add in any of those other applications will absolutely show up here under worked days. All right, here's assuming that I've gone through all my employees. They look good. Their state taxes look good. The performance bonus shows up. One thing that we didn't actually take a look at is you'll see medical FSA dependent care. Everything that we had put under the benefits section, they will also show up here, and it differs from employees. So you'll see here, Jessica has medical FSA and FSA dependent care, but we didn't add any other benefits. But Randall has dental, medical, vision, along with FSA and FSA dependent care.
Perfect.
And this comes back to the whole point of setting up employees to make sure your payslips reflect it. All right.
Perfect.
Let's go ahead and validate.
Can I stop you right
of
there?
Course
because
you can.
We just got a question that mentions how can we set up deductions with rules for different employees. So I think it's important. We were showing how the pay slips look or the pay slip calculation look with all those different deductions. But can we refresh and remind the employee setup?
Yes, we can. Let's take Jessica as an example here because we already have a salary adjustment. In the employee setup, and you can also access employees directly from the payroll application. You don't have to come back to the employees app. We have right next to the payroll tab, we have salary adjustments, which is where you would add any adjustments you want to their payslip lines. So if I click on add a salary adjustment here, I would define what type of salary adjustment it is. You can, of course, create new salary adjustment types if you want. But let's say I'm adding a specific child support or, let's say student loans as a specific salary adjustment. I mention what the payslip amount is. And of course, you can specify if it's a negative value or not. And this is what defines the way it's going to show up on your payslip, whether it's a negative or whether it's going to be a deduction or not.
Exactly.
The duration is the important bit because salary adjustments can be something that's recurring across all payslips. So if you set it to one time, you can specify, what it is, from when it should show up, and then the next payslip you create for this period will have this salary adjustment as part of it.
Great.
You can, of course, also set it to limited or unlimited, and that just means it's going to show up until you you'll see it says running here. You can stop it at any point, so it's not that you have to delete the entire salary adjustment. You can just say, I'm going to stop it, create a payslip for this period, and then I'm going to run it again if that scenario ever arises.
And that's a very good point. I think for payroll itself, I would never recommend deleting things. If you can scroll down to the chatter will show you, like when we were doing this testing and preparing this database to show you the power behind payroll, we move things around quite a bit with Harry. So everything that you move, not delete, but move and edit will be recorded, thank you, at the chatter level. So I recommend you never delete, just edit things around, and you will have the traceability to troubleshoot, because that will happen. You will need to troubleshoot eventually. And the chatter is a very powerful tool.
It's a great point, Kata. This is exactly where you will keep track of every changes made to your employees. And that's important because we need to know, how things have changed with these employees.
Perfect.
All right. Great questions, everyone. Just moving back to payroll, but feel free to stop me with any questions you see that's relevant to what we're going to be showing here. Let's go back to our pay runs here, and you will see that there's a pay run that we created just now. These are the ones from May that we set up already prior to the webinar. But this one shows you the one for June. It'll have the employer cost gross and net shows up for all the pay slips, and you'll see the number of pay slips right here. I'm going to jump in here. Of course, we've gone through the process of reviewing each payslip. Keep in mind, before you hit validate, I highly recommend you actually look into the payslips and make sure that it's not missing a salary rule that you want, maybe a salary adjustment that you want. Yeah. But assuming, we have actually gone through everything, the net wages look good, the gross the gross wage along with all the deductions also look good, we can go ahead and hit validate. It will, of course, ask you, are you sure you want to proceed? Because at this point, you're validating a payslip. You can, of course, reset it back to draft, but it's always best to make sure that it's exactly how you want it to be before you go ahead and hit validate. And at this point, we have 3 different payslips that are marked as done, but you'll see there's one more step here, which is paid. Okay. You will see a button in here that says payment report. And common question we get here is, how do we pay these employees, or what are the ways in which we can pay these employees? You can, of course, just manually mark it as paid. When would we ideally be doing this, Kata, if we're just marking it as paid and not taking care of the payment itself?
That button is in there if you have different places, or maybe you're a payroll company that it's outsourcing company, the payroll process through other software, through other companies, and you just got an email saying like, hey, payroll payment went through, everything is okay. You just keep this tab open for traceability. But what we need, or what we want to do at the end, is mark it as paid.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If we want to automate things a little bit more, I would recommend showing the payment report. And before you show it, and just 1 second, it's just because the question that I see in there is related to bank linking. So as of now, we do have direct deposit available in Odoo. That means automation of payments, or payment initiation directly from Odoo or from bank account to bank account directly through Odoo. We are improving that feature right now. We don't have a specific timeline when it will be released, but the idea is that in a couple of more iterations, we will have the availability to pay our employees directly from here. So I imagine the bank linking that is mentioned by Tony, it is direct deposit. In that case, we don't have direct deposit available in the payroll app. We do have it in the accounting side for batching payments. But what we do have is the payment report that is linked to an ACHA file.
Thank you, Kata. So payment report, which Kata just mentioned, if I hit on this, that's when a pop-up comes up which says generate your payment report. This is where you can create what we call, what we have as a NACHA file, which is particular to the US. So you can create a NACHA file for 100 employee payslips that you've just created. This is of course very useful because if you want to import this into your bank as a file and then just process all your payslip payments in one go instead of having to treat it as separate payslips, this is where you can generate your Nacha file. Of course, to set up Nacha itself, there are accounting settings in your journals where you can configure what your originator ID is, what some of these other configurations are for Nacha. But once you have that set up, you can directly generate the Nacha file from here. You'll see I clicked on that, and then that should download the Nacha file directly for you. Okay, you'll see right here. And then I can go ahead and hit save, and then it will just download the Nacha file, which I can then access and then upload into my bank to process all payments.
And that is what we've seen or what we've done with our previous implementations. Companies have this way, or they actually like doing it like this because it avoids errors or try to minimize errors because you have the option to troubleshoot one extra time. So you have an incorrect bank account, you never paid an employee that was missing, you have this extra step that allow you to troubleshoot and to review that everything is correctly set up. But we're just to clarify the last question and just to summarize, the direct deposit is on the works and it should be ready soonish.
Yeah. Let's jump into one of the payslips that we just created. A quick note, if you notice that I jumped into payslips here, anything you create or any pay run that you create which creates payslips for employees will show up under payslips as well. So it's not that you're creating either pay runs or payslips. Pay runs essentially create payslips which will show up under the payslip menu item. And you'll see one for Abigail here. I want to circle back to a question from Denise on journal entries, or how does this impact accounting? You'll see here, once the payslip has been validated, once you've gone through your payslips or your pay run and validated it, you will see journal entries that are created here. And if you click on that, it directly takes you to the journal entry that's being created and the accounts that are associated with many of these salary rules, some of them being expense accounts, they could be payable accounts. But you'll see here that this will, once you post this will directly impact your accounting reports. And that's important because when you're paying your employees, you're essentially, it needs to show up in accounting as well because those are transactions that you're making out to your employees.
One question, Hari.
Yeah,
in your experience, do you think those accounts are enough for companies, or do you think that they're the basic accounts, or how have you handled that before?
Yeah, that's a great question. These accounts are configured directly on the payslip lines or the salary rules itself. As part of configuration, which is very important for a system that uses payroll configurations, is one of the things that you need to make sure is correct to ensure that these accounts that show up on your journal entries are right. Where you will actually find them is on the salary rules itself. So if you go into configuration, you'll see rules here. I'm going to jump into rules real quick to show you where you can set that up. And this is where you'll find most of your payslip lines or salary rules, each of which will have their own account. So if I open any one of these up, you will see an entire tab called accounting where you can configure your debit account and credit account.
Perfect. And I think this is a good moment to mention that to answer the question before, I know that sometimes, or payroll can be very specific, especially if we tailor or we link it to the accounting app. So sometimes the accounts that we have in Odoo are very general. We have salaries and wages, we have employee taxes and employer taxes, both payable to the third party that collects those taxes. And then we have the net payable, that is what the salary that the employee will receive.
Yeah.
But we know that there's benefits in between. We know that there's sometimes state taxes. There's sometimes X amount of reasons that you would like to have extra rules and extra debit and credit accounts. That is totally configurable in Odoo. The first thing that you need to do is ensure that you have the account created from your chart of accounts, and then you can link it where Harry was mentioning before, directly on the rule, on the credit side or on the debit side, depending on where you want to hit your books. In my experience, implementing and working with clients, implementing payroll is not something that you do with just one person, do it in a day, and that's it. It requires a lot of configuration and a lot of testing with other departments too. So payroll is also a process that involves on-field or employee management. It will include the payroll department and it will include the accounting department. So in this case, if you see that that journal entry seems good, but it's very straightforward. Can we take a look again at
Yeah,
it?
of course. Let me
So
open
it's
up.
very simple. That's okay. We start from a gross salary and we finish with a net salary. And also we see that final line of salary and wages, that is an adjustment entry.
Yes.
Because we didn't add any credit and debit accounts to our specific benefits that are we offering. The Odoo General US product will not offer also those specific accounts for your needs because we didn't want to make assumptions for your company. But Odoo will tell you like, hey, you need to adjust something. We need to make that journal entry, that your journal entry need to be balanced. And if it's not balanced, you need to go in there and troubleshoot. The easiest way to troubleshoot is review that line, the adjustment entry. So everything in payroll, we offer a product, is a basic product or is a basic view to start that tailor or that makes sense to most companies and small and middle-sized companies. But again, you can add whatever you want. Just don't forget that this is tied to a lot of other apps too.
Yes. Thank you for that, Kata.
Thank you, Hari.
Everything in payroll requires a review because at the end of the day, it's payment that goes out to your employees, payments that hit employer taxes. So even the journal entries, even though it's using these accounts that we have already set up for you or pre-configured for you, you will need to verify that these are the accounts you want to use, or if they have very specific accounts. Most clients have their own accounts that they want to hit for each of these salary rules. You will need to verify that that's right. And that's also why you'll see the journal entry is not yet posted. So you have full flexibility to come in here and say, oh, you know what, I don't want to use employer taxes. And instead, I have a different account that I'm going to use. Make sure that this is right, and you can post it once this is hitting the right accounts for the right debits and credits. I see a question here. When a payroll payment is created and it hits the bank or the check hits the bank, should the transaction be reconciled with the payroll entry or payment? The payment that you create from here, the payment report that we created, is in fact treated as a payment in the accounting application as well. So when your bank syncs with the accounting application and you see the bank statement line comes in, you can very much reconcile that with the payment that's been created or the actual payment report that's been created. That's part of a reconciliation process in accounting. I don't want to go too much into detail because that would be a whole different discussion on how reconciliation works. Short answer to your question is reconciliation is very much a part of Odoo accounting, and you can reconcile payslip payments or payroll payments as well with your bank statement lines. Thank you for that. Good question. Denise has a similar question. If I'm paying from my own company and the payment hits the bank, will that be reconciled automatically? You can have it reconcile automatically if you set up maybe reconciliation models. I think that depends case to case. If you do want the power to be able to review what your bank statements are and the payments that you've made to your employees, I recommend taking a look at it and doing a manual reconciliation, especially for payroll. But you absolutely can set up automatic reconciliations if you wanted to set it up that way.
Perfect. And I just want to highlight again that payroll is a process that it's usually not work alone or just one person. That person interacts with a lot of other departments. So we're kickstarting that accounting or reconciliation process from the pay run or from the pay slips. We create that journal entry. Usually they will be stored in this salaries journal, but then it's part of the accounting department to go through that. I know that in some companies it's one person that reviews everything, and that's okay. You have the ability to do that. But if you want to segregate those processes, you don't want to process payroll and also pay payroll and reconcile those transactions, you can also take advantage of that organization inside Odoo.
Yeah.
I do have one more question before you. I know that you have shown us a lot, and there's a lot to review, but I would like to see how attendances link to the or to the payroll.
That's right. We've taken a look at salaried employees, but we haven't actually taken a look at hourly employees here. So when we created the pay run, what we did was this is for regular employees. But if I create a pay run for hourly pay, this is going to create a pay slip for my employees that are set to the salary structure, which is hourly pay. One thing to keep in mind before I actually create the pay run or the pay slip itself, we need to make sure that the attendances is actually something that exists in here. And that's because if you're paying an employee based on the hours they have worked, but you don't actually have the hours recorded in Odoo, there's no way for Odoo to know what are the hours they have worked and how much should the actual wages be. And that's why if I navigate out of my payslip application here, attendances is where you would be actually configuring their clock in and clock out time or check in and check out time for these employees that are paid by the hour. So if I actually go into the month view here, you'll see for Michael Smith, which is our one employee who's paid hourly, you'll see our attendance records already created here. In the interest of time, we've already created some of these attendance records, but you can totally hit on new and then say they've checked in at this time, checked out at this time. And then Odoo will calculate exactly how many hours those are. And if you have the hourly wages set up, that will also show up on the payslip. And I can show you that in just a minute. One thing to keep in mind, and I guess a common question we get with attendances is, do we need to do this manually, or is there a kiosk we can put at our door or an iPad we can put where employees can just check in and check out? And that's very much a feature in the attendances app. Now, Michael Smith already has some attendances for the month of June. So if I go back to payroll here, I'm going to create a pay slip this time because we already took a look at how pay runs are created. And I'll just do an off-cycle pay slip for Michael.
Perfect.
Okay. Now, you'll see here, this is for June 1st to June 30th. Let me go ahead and save that, and we'll compute the actual salary computation. What the compute button does is it actually takes all the calculations into account and gives you the values. But let's stay here on work days for a bit, because what you'll notice here is it actually shows you that Michael's worked for 176 hours of attendance and 11 hours of overtime. How does payroll know that it needs to be overtime, Kata? Or why didn't it all put it under attendance?
So we know that overtime is a important topic in terms of payroll, and Odoo recently has a solution for that. So we know we need to configure overtime for and following federal and state rules, and that will change. It can change. So we can customize that
Absolutely.
particular rules directly in this new rule set feature.
Yeah. It's directly under the attendances app under configuration. You'll find overtime rule sets where you can set up specific rule sets for overtime, because we know that overtime follows some rules. Like, for example, if you work more than 40 hours a week, any hour on top of that is considered overtime.
Perfect.
This is where you would configure all of that. We're not going to go into every single field and detail here in the interest of time. I 100% recommend you explore this option if you do have specific rules on how overtime should be calculated. And if I come back to my payslips here for Michael, this line item shows up because we already have a rule set up.
Perfect. And this, I think, aligns a little bit with what Hari mentioned at the beginning. If you have very specific questions, or if you want to make sure that Odoo is configured with the needs of your specific company in mind, we do have our professional services available. You can access them through our sales teams for whatever question we have. And we do have 4 minutes left of this webinar, and I would like to take that time to answer a couple of questions that were unanswered from the chat. One of them says, what are the big gaps between Odoo payroll and specialized payroll systems in the US? What are the plans for addressing those gaps? That's a very good question. So if we think about Odoo, first of all, Odoo is an ERP. As you mentioned, for specialized payroll systems, there's a lot of services that they offer on top of just the salary calculation. But sometimes you need to have 4, 3, or a lot of other softwares to finish and to cover all your business needs. From Odoo, you, as we mentioned before and as we show, you can have connection from all those apps or from all those processes directly in Odoo. So the biggest gaps, I would say, is connection directly to third parties for payments. We're working on that. for health or for insurance, for workers' compensation, so very specific needs. If you want to automate a lot of things in terms of payroll and connection to third parties, that is, I think, the biggest gap that Odoo faces today. But again, you don't need to connect to other softwares to finish your whole business process. So you need to consider what is better for your company. And the last question, I don't know if you want to answer this, Hari. How does it work for employees without an Odoo license? How can Odoo, or how can employees self-service?
You can use Odoo with the one app free service. Although, if this question is particularly for payroll, you can definitely use the portal views if we have a portal view that employees or users can use if you don't actually want to use it with an Odoo license. I do recommend that for payroll, you go through our professional services and get an actual business systems analyst to review what we have set up. Only because apps like payroll and even accounting included can have a lot of moving parts, and I think it will really help having someone validate these processes, these configurations for you, because even one missed configuration can lead to a payslip that looks completely different.
Yeah, we currently don't have a self-service option.
We don't, yeah.
For employees, they need to have a licensed user if they want to manage everything. But remember that managers can manage employee information like time off and attendance, and we can send an email to share the pay slip to our employees. So I think we've covered almost all the questions except for holiday pay, if it works the same. It works the same, so you can pay your regular attendance for holiday pay, your regular rate for holiday pay, or you can pay extra or whatever your company needs or it's legally drawn to. But you need to do that with an extra layer of configuration that is due through the time off app, where you can create the holiday and then you will see it directly in the payroll app. And I think we're cute that the time is almost over.
Yeah.
So, Hari, I think you have a couple of announcements that you wanted to make.
Yes. Thank you all for joining, first of all. We really appreciate all the questions, really smart questions, well thought out questions. I hope we're able to answer most, if not all, the questions. I do want to leave you with what's coming up next in terms of Odoo Live Services. We have another session coming up for regular Q&A on July 8th at 11 a.m. PST. So tune in for that. We'll be doing these live services more often. So you definitely tune into the ones that you want to, or if you just want to learn about Odoo in general, ask your questions. This is a very good space for you to jump in and ask questions, or just generally understand or learn more about Odoo. We also want to mention we have Odoo Experience Americas. That's happening on September 2nd and 3rd on Pier 27. So if you guys are in the Bay Area or would like to join, you can definitely just register for free online. Go check out our website. You will see registration links in there where you can register and join us for our Odoo Experience Americas.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining. And we'll see you soon.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate all the questions, and hopefully we'll see you in another webinar.